And joining me tonight is a very special guest. I'm joined by Gideon Levy, award-winning columnist and journalist with the Haaretz, Israel's newspaper. Appreciate your joining us there, Mr. Levy, from Tel Aviv. I want to first turn to something you've just written, which says the war in Gaza must stop immediately. You say it isn't leading anywhere good. Massacres can be answered with massacres, but even a terrible massacre like the one perpetrated in southern Israel cannot justify what follows without no limits. You want to explain to us what you mean when you say the war in Gaza must stop immediately, sir?
Look, the war in Gaza was launched with justifications. I mean, after the really barbaric attack on Israel's south, after murdering so many civilians, children, women, old people, it was very justified to launch a war over Gaza. Mm-hmm. But the question we all have to ask ourselves after 12 days is, where are you heading? Where are we heading to? Mm-hmm. With over 1,000 Palestinian children killed in the last 12 days, with half of Gaza really totally destroyed, what is the purpose? I mean, how will we end it and what will be in the day after? And that's the main question. Yes, I understand the sentiment to punish Gaza, to punish Hamas, to try to get rid of Hamas. Mm-hmm. And then what? And then what? So I think that Gaza was punished enough.
But there will be those who will say, Mr. Levy, that that's not a popular view in Israel at the moment. Israel wants revenge. There is still anger there for the barbaric attack of October 7th. And that revenge can only be done when Hamas, according to your government, is finished, annihilated, to use the words of your Prime Minister.
Yeah, and I totally identify myself with those sentiments. But, you know, emotions cannot be a guide, for sure not the only guide, in such times. In such times, we have also to think to a little longer and wider and deeper scale, and not only think about satisfying all kind of justified emotions. And the question is, what does Israel gain out of killing more and more civilians, more and more children, more and more women? What will come out of it? Just more hatred, more frustration, and above all, more suffer.
You know, it's interesting you're saying this a day after President Biden was in Israel, where he told the Prime Minister, don't repeat some of the mistakes we made after 9/11. Effectively, what you're saying is, yes, the anger is justified, but the outlet for anger cannot be wiping out Palestinians. Am I correct?
Word by word. I think that the president gave here a very courageous declaration, namely that going and invading Iraq after 9/11 was a historical mistake. The United States didn't gain anything out of it, and the only victims, the only one who paid for it, are obviously the civilian population in Iraq. And there are so many other examples in which an operation was justified by sentiments, but didn't lead to anything better than before.
So you're saying don't be driven by sentiment. How much of this is based on what's happened in the last 48 hours? There was this terrible blast which took place at a hospital site in Gaza. Hundreds of people have died, and there are conflicting versions. Israel has its own version of what happened, blames the Islamic Jihad's misfired rocket, and the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas blame the Israeli government. How much of what you're saying today, this rage, this sentiment which you're saying must be controlled, is also influenced by what you saw happen 2 days ago?
Yeah, exactly, because what happened there, I can even say that I don't care who did it. I know that 407 people paid in the price in their lives. I saw the scenes, I saw the pictures, children dying on the ground of a hospital, tens of children killed by no matter who. Mm-hmm. And this crazy bloodbath must end, because it is totally without any purpose.
But then what happens to Hamas? Because in a sense, Israel wants Hamas to pay a price for the barbaric attack of October 7th. How, if the siege is called off, if there is no ground invasion, as you're suggesting there shouldn't be, and the war is called off, what happens to Hamas? Hamas then will claim victory.
Hamas must be punished. Hamas must be removed. If this is realistic, I'm not sure it is realistic. And after having saying this, we have to ask ourselves, and who will replace Hamas? Mm-hmm. Who exactly will replace them? This is a question that should be answered. Mm-hmm. I wish that Hamas will disappear. I hope it is now being beaten. I'm not sure that a ground operation will bring to this goal, because, you know, you can kill some of the leaders, some of the commanders, some of their fighters, and you get new ones, and you get replacement, and many times the replacement is worse than the former one. We have to get to the roots of things, and above all, first of all, and above all, open the cage of Gaza, open Gaza to the world, open Gaza, I mean, let people of Gaza live some kind of normal life after 17 years of jail.
You believe that Gaza is an open prison, it is a cage, because there will be Israelis out there listening to you, and even people in our country, in India, will say, Mr. Levy is an anti-national. He's going against Israel's stated policy when he says Gaza is a cage, Gaza is an open prison.
How else can you define Gaza? There is no other way to define Gaza but as a cage. It's closed from all directions, mainly by Israel, partly by Egypt, and partly by the sea. Nobody can come in, nobody can get out without permission of Israel. Israel hardly gives any permission to anyone. Goods are coming in and above all coming out really in a very, very low scale. Generation after generation, young people are born in this reality. The whole Gaza Strip is so small, and they have no perspective for anything in their lives. For how long can you think human beings can live like this?
I take your point, but the fear is after October 7th, there will be even less space for Israelis to even think in the direction that you're talking about, opening up Gaza, remove this cage that you put the Palestinians in, if you want to return to peace. Israelis will think Mr. Levy is letting off people who they blame for what happened on October 7th.
First of all, we cannot blame 2 million people for what happened in October 7th, because 2 million people are not involved in what happened in October 7th. In October 7th, Hamas is to be blamed, and Hamas only. Mm-hmm. And above all, look, let's say we keep the siege, we keep the Gaza as a cage. We tried it so many times. We'll go for a ground operation. We tried it so many times. It never brought any achievements. It never brought any progress or any change. Why wouldn't we once try an alternative way? We know that the way of fighting, killing, bombing doesn't lead to anywhere. Let's try once an alternative way, because otherwise I can assure you in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time from now, we will be back in square one.
Let's look at that alternative, Mr. Levy, because you wrote in a recent piece also, after decades of Palestinian subjugation under Israeli rule, you can kill the current top people of Hamas, but you will not kill the ideology of Hamas. What is the alternative? What is this alternative route, given the fact that you're saying that destroying the ideology of Hamas will not be easy?
No, it will not be easy, because after so many years of occupation, of siege, of Hamas rule, people of Gaza and Palestinians in general, and also many Arabs and Muslims all over the world, are today in a very, very extreme place. And I don't want to sound as a naive guy who says, let's just open Gaza and there will be peace. Not at all. It will take years, decades, maybe generations until perceptions will change. Mm-hmm. But we have to start from somewhere. because violence for sure will not do it. Violence will make all Gaza Hamas, all the Palestinian Hamas, and maybe all the Arabs and the Muslims in the world Hamas, once we will not try an alternative way.
But tell me the alternative way, because over the years, the obvious alternative way was seen as a two-state solution of an Israeli state and a Palestinian state living peaceably next to each other. That hasn't worked out. So what is this alternative way that you would say could lead to some kind of enduring peace?
First of all, let's ask, why didn't it work out? It worked out because Israel was not a partner, because Israel had built so many settlements in the occupied territories and sent so many Jewish settlers to the settlements that the two-state solution was irrelevant anymore. There is no place, no room for a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. So you can't just say, we tried the two-state solution, it didn't work. It didn't work out because Israel, the occupier, didn't give it a chance.
So what would you say? You say that the existing settlements, for example, in the West Bank have to be moved out of the West Bank, because there will be those who will say the Palestinian Authority as well as Hamas have also a role, are also culpable for the failure of this two-state solution.
You can't share the responsibility between the occupier and the occupied one. There is a very clear responsibility on the shoulders of the occupier. Mm-hmm. They are not symmetric. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that the settlements can be removed anymore. I mean, there are over 700,000 Jewish settlers, including in East Jerusalem. Who is going to remove them? Who? No chance. We have to start to work out a new discourse, namely to have a democracy between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, one person, one vote, equality between Palestinians and Jews who live together in one democratic country. Right now, it sounds really fantastic, not realistic, and misleading. But I don't know any other solution.
But with Benjamin Netanyahu in power, someone who in a way has made it very clear that he's going to take a tough stand towards the Palestinians, especially post-October 7th, even tougher possibly, such a solution seems unlikely, unthinkable almost, given that Mr. Netanyahu himself is accused today by the Palestinians of having actively encouraged these settlements, and there is so much of mistrust, anger and hate out there. How do you end that hatred?
First of all, I have news for you. Not only with Mr. Netanyahu, this solution is right now unthinkable. It is unthinkable with any Israeli potential prime minister. I don't know any of the Israeli politicians and leaders who will go for it. Mm-hmm. Sure, we are very far off it. But again, I have to ask, so what are they suggesting? More and more bloodshed? Let's have good luck with this.
But there will be, again, I come back to it, Mr. Levy, there will be victims, their families today who are still enraged, who are still hurting after that dastardly attack of October 7th. Somewhere their rage has to be satiated in a way. So how do you satiate their rage, their hatred that has been built up now on both sides? There are Gazans who are hating Israelis and vice versa. And it's not just, it didn't happen on October 7th, it's been stretching across several decades. How does that end? How do you solve that?
I don't know how it ends, I know only how it starts. Mm-hmm. It starts with steps which will gradually, slowly, maybe years, maybe more, will change this reality. If you don't want to change this reality, so you're right. Mm-hmm. The idea is to change some things. We should first of all go for a very rapid deal and very generous deal to release all the kidnapped Israelis and the Palestinian prisoners in jail. This can be the first step which will unease a little bit the atmosphere. If we will not do it, we will lose also the 200 kidnapped Israelis.
So you're saying that the Israeli hostages in the hands of Hamas should be released and Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails should also be released, and that could be the first step towards trying to reduce some of this anger and hatred. Am I correct?
Yes.
as a first step? Because you've also said in a very strong opinion recently, Israel cannot imprison 2 million Gazans without paying a cruel price. And you say behind all the lies of recent times lies Israeli arrogance. The idea that we can do whatever we like, that we'll never pay the price and be punished for it. Are you saying, in a sense, what's happened in the last fortnight has ended this notion of Israeli invincibility once and for all, and therefore what has happened is also a wake-up call for Israel?
Look, Israel for decades believed that it can go on with its policies, with its really beautiful lives in Israel, with prosperity, with a high-tech nation, with selling enormous quantities of weapons to your country and to some other countries. And the Palestinians will continue to live forever, either in the cage of Gaza or under the military dictatorship in the West Bank. And this can last forever and everything is fine. We normalized this reality. But this reality was not normal. And there is a time in which you pay the price. I never knew when will it come, but it was very clear that being responsible to such a reality must have a price. And here we are.
Do you believe then, in a way, Netanyahu on one side and the Hamas on the other have fed on each other? They both sort of pushed themselves into a conflict which has tragically ended or tragically found its way in these mindless killings? Do you believe that that's part of the problem, that any form of extremism is creating these divides within society there?
I think it's deeper than just to take Netanyahu and Hamas. It's much deeper and it goes much more backwards. We are dealing with a conflict of over 100 years. We are dealing with an occupation which is 55 years. It's not only about one politician and one organization. It's about an ongoing process in which Israel never did the right thing vis-a-vis the neighbors, vis-a-vis the people who are living in the same land and who were living in this land much before the Jews came here. So if we want to be accepted to this neighborhood, we have to change our behavior, like any new person who comes to a new neighborhood. And as long as we continue with this attitude that the Palestinians don't interest us and their fate can be totally ignored, then from time to time there will be those bloody wake-up calls.
So do you accept the view that I've heard from Palestinians in the last few days, that we've been treated as second-class citizens for much too long, that there's a sort of xenophobic racism that has targeted us?
First of all, it's not a question of view, it's a question of fact. 5 million, out of the 5 million Palestinians living in Israel and in the occupied territories and in Gaza, there is around 2 million, around 1 million who are, no, 5 million, sorry about the figure. 5 million are living in Gaza and in the West Bank. They are maybe the only people in the world without any citizenship. Can you imagine yourself, people without any citizenship of any country? Most of them, not all of them, most of them. No civil rights whatsoever, no national rights whatsoever. Then we have the 2 million Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, who have all the formal rights, but are heavily discriminated. Those are not a question of views, those are question of facts. And as long as this continues and the Jewish superiority continues to be the main characteristic of the Jewish state, namely Israel, then those things will continue to bleed.
There is also, of course, the other side, which is the races. There is a sense of a radical Islamic ideology being spread from Iran, groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, creating, in a way, the conditions for the kind of terror that struck southern Israel 2 weeks ago. Do you believe that that too is a big concern, is a threat, that this war could spread to some of those countries, particularly since Hamas is seen as a proxy by some for the Iranian government?
Without any doubt. Look, it's not only about the region. I must remind you, I don't have to remind you that radicalism and radical Islam is all over the world now, and it's getting stronger, including maybe in your country and around you. The question is, do you supply those extreme fundamental movements? Do you supply them with weapons, with excuses, with reasons, with ammunition to hate more and to become more radical? Or do you try to minimize their excuses for their brutality and cruelty? And the occupation, for example, and putting Gaza in a cage is a very powerful fuel to fuel people around the world, mainly Muslims, and to show them, look what the West is doing us, look what the Jews are doing us, look what Israel is doing us, or to our brothers.
But there is no guarantee that uncaging people will necessarily end the radicalism. You're saying that you'll be reducing one of the excuses that they have for radicalism, but there is no guarantee that radicalism will end. So the fear will remain that you will have radical elements in and around Israel, and therefore Israel believes that for its own national security, it has to do more to finish off Hamas, and it cannot uncage the people out in Gaza. That's how the Israelis will see it.
First of all, there are no guarantees whatsoever. Mm-hmm. There's only one guarantee, that if Israel will continue with the same policy, there will be no solution, and those wars will come again and again. This is guaranteed. All the rest is not guaranteed. You see, Israel put Gaza in a cage because of security. Mm-hmm. So we saw how does our security look like on Saturday the 7th, when 1,400 Israelis were slaughtered within one day. That's the security that we got from the siege.
But Mr. Levy, there will be those, again, let me ask you to look at the Western world. You've got America, which has promised full support to Israel, which is sending its carriers, its weaponry, its resources. The Western world, Rishi Sunak was today there in Israel. The Western world seems to be firmly with Israel. Should they be sending out the kind of message you're sending out today, that you've got to end this war and look for peace?
Absolutely. They should have done it long time ago. I think the West and the United States above all contributed to normalization of the siege, normalization of the occupation, normalization of the attitude toward the Palestinian people by supporting Israel quite blindly and automatically. Mm-hmm. And here is the outcome. Sure, there is a responsibility on the West. Now when the West is sending sympathy and aid and solidarity and carriers, it's great. I really mean it. It gives any Israeli a feeling of security. But again, this is not a solution for the long run.
Mm-hmm. So what is your message then, the bigger message to those listening to you here in India who will wonder, is Gideon Levy a minority view within Israel, and therefore will the majority view prevail that we have to go into a ground invasion into Gaza, annihilate Hamas? What will you tell Indians listening to you today? Is there a conflicting view within your country on this entire issue?
Unfortunately not, or not enough. There is even no discussion about it, especially not in times of war. But also in normal times, the debate in Israel is very, very superficial and doesn't touch those issues at all. Mm-hmm. We are living in denial. It's a society which lives in denial for many, many years. And this denial is a terrible enemy of any solution, because when you live in denial, mm-hmm. you are not connected to reality.
But while Israel lives in denial, there'll be those who will say the Palestinians also live in denial. They've also been ill-served by a authoritarian leadership, or certainly a corrupted leadership over the years. Do you believe that they also will have to introspect in the aftermath of all that's happened? Why should innocent civilians lose lives on both sides? There is a narrative of victimhood on both sides.
No doubt, but again, I don't see the symmetry. The Palestinians made enormous mistakes, but you can't compare it to the mistakes that Israel did, because Israel is the occupier, Israel is the strong party, and Israel decides how does it look.
You know, I want to ask you this, reading you over the last few weeks, in particular in the Haaretz, it's actually, as a journalist, I feel proud to know that there is someone telling truth to power so strongly. How do you do it, Mr. Levy? How do you manage to tell truth to power and yet not find yourself under, are you intimidated, put under pressure? Does the government want to still your voice, or are you allowed to speak out in the way you are at the moment?
No, I'm allowed to speak out, and I still enjoy full freedom, especially in my newspaper, but also vis-a-vis the government, the army. I mean, as a Jewish citizen of Israel and as a member of staff of Haaretz, which is a very respectable newspaper, I can't complain. Nobody tries to shut my mouth, but I don't take it for granted, by the way.
And no one calls you anti-national, do they?
No, they call me all kinds of names, but I don't feel threatened.
One final question. Every time these atrocities against Palestinians are raised, there will be those who will point to history, which you in a way also have, to the Holocaust, to the sufferings of the Jews. Are you saying there is no symmetry between the sufferings the Jews have gone through and the sufferings that the Arabs are going through today?
No doubt there is no symmetry, but the fact that the Jews suffered so much does not justify Jews creating suffers to others. The lesson should be the opposite one. Because the Jews suffered so much, they should have been much more sensitive to the suffer of other peoples.
That's a very interesting perspective, one which I hope is listened to by many across the world. The last thing you need is to get into some kind of a scorecard of the suffering that people have endured. Civilians, non-combatants, as you rightly say, sir, have to be protected at all costs, and peace is the only way forward. Gideon Levy, more power to your voice, and thank you so much for joining me here tonight on India Today. Thank you.